Listen, he is a gladiator. You know, I called Tim a warrior. Listen, the skull fight, could Canelo have done more? Absolutely. It's going to be the same version of guy that's going to show up in September? No.
So you feel Canelo's going to win the fight?
I leaned Canelo, yeah.
Yeah.
I always have.
Welcome back to Box Eye Hub, your go-to spot for deep dives into the world of boxing, where we break down the biggest fights and the sharpest predictions from the experts. Today, we are talking about Chris Algieri's take on the potential Canelo Alvarez versus Terence Crawford fight, a matchup that has the boxing world buzzing. Algieri has shared his thoughts on what could happen if these two meet in September, and while he respects both fighters, his breakdown shows exactly why he is leaning toward Canelo. We are going to walk through every key statement Algieri made, looking at what it means for the fight and how it shapes the narrative around this potential clash. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, like the video, and drop your thoughts in the comments about who you think takes this one. Let's get into it. Chris Algieri starts by addressing the elephant in the room. He recalls that Canelo was in peak physical shape during the fight against John Ryder, often referred to as the skull fight, but he immediately questions whether Canelo will be in that same condition come September when facing Crawford. His answer is a clear no.
Listen, the skull fight, could Canelo have done more? Absolutely.
This is a powerful way to open his analysis because it sets the tone for a discussion not just about skills, but about timing and conditioning. In boxing, the version of a fighter that shows up on fight night is everything. Even the most skilled athlete can falter if their conditioning is off, and Algieri is implying that the Canelo we see against Crawford might not be the same razor-sharp, fully tuned fighter from his past. That alone introduces uncertainty. He is not saying Canelo is finished or incapable, but rather that the reality of boxing is that peaks do not last forever. Fighters age, their bodies take damage, and their training motivation can fluctuate. If Canelo's form has dipped even slightly, that could give Crawford an edge. However, it also subtly suggests that if Canelo somehow manages to recapture that peak form, he becomes an even more dangerous opponent. This first point frames the entire matchup as a question of which version of Canelo will show up, and it challenges fans to consider how much recent performance trends should weigh into predictions.
It's going to be the same version of guy that's going to show up in September? No.
Building on his earlier observation, Algieri adds that Canelo simply does not look as fit as before. He describes him as looking listless, almost like a fighter who has lost some of the spark that once defined him. He even notes that Canelo no longer seems to have the crowd's full backing. This is a major statement because Canelo has been one of boxing's biggest box office draws for years. The crowd is not just a source of noise, it is an energy boost, a psychological weapon that can sway momentum in big fights. If Canelo is losing that connection, it could signal either a shift in public perception or a decline in his own ability to inspire the same level of excitement.
Canelo, he didn't look as fit as he did his last fight. He looked listless. He looked like he didn't care. He didn't have the crowd behind him.
A listless fighter can be dangerous in a different way. They may be conserving energy. They may be playing possum, but they are also at risk of being outworked by a more motivated opponent. In Crawford, Canelo would be facing a man known for his relentless competitiveness and adaptability. Algieri's choice of words suggests that unless Canelo reignites his own internal fire and reestablishes that connection with the fans, he may be at a disadvantage in the intangible aspects of the fight. This point is less about physical ability and more about emotional and psychological readiness, which in boxing can often be the deciding factor when skill levels are close. Despite his earlier concerns, Algieri quickly reminds everyone that Canelo is still without question a gladiator. This is not empty praise. Calling a boxer a gladiator in this context means acknowledging that they will fight through adversity, take risks, and go to war for the fans' entertainment. He makes it clear that Canelo is always present for the occasion, ready to perform on the biggest stage. That mentality is not something every fighter possesses. It means that even if Canelo is not at peak fitness, he will still bring an intensity and willingness to exchange that can trouble any opponent, including Crawford. This ties into a deeper truth about championship-level boxing. Great fighters can sometimes defy their own physical decline with sheer willpower and competitive spirit. Canelo's track record in high-pressure situations shows that he thrives under the bright lights, and Algieri's recognition of this suggests that counting Canelo out entirely would be foolish. It is also a subtle reminder that while Crawford may have the skills to win, he will have to earn it the hard way against a man who refuses to fold. In boxing, mentality can be the equalizer, and Canelo's gladiator nature ensures that any fight he is in will be a grueling test for his opponent.
Listen, he is a gladiator. You know, I called Tim a warrior. Canelo's a gladiator. He is there for the adoration of the fans. So, but I think it's good. I think it makes the fight more enticing if people are thinking, a lot of people are thinking that Crawford can win.
Algieri then shifts to what he believes will make this fight so fascinating. He acknowledges that many people will go in assuming Crawford will win, but he quickly flips the script by suggesting that it is entirely possible for Canelo to pull off the victory. He even clarifies that this is not to take anything away from Crawford. He openly admits Crawford is fully capable of winning, but that the styles and circumstances make this matchup unpredictable.
Crawford can absolutely win the fight. I'm not saying he can't win the fight. But in terms of, how I see it, it hasn't really changed.
This is an important observation because it breaks the binary thinking that often surrounds super fights. Instead of simply choosing a winner based on popularity or recent form, Algieri is urging fans to look deeper into the dynamics. Crawford is an exceptional technician, a master of adjustments, and undefeated for a reason. But Canelo brings size, experience, and a style that can potentially neutralize Crawford's strengths. The uncertainty Algieri highlights is what makes boxing compelling. When two elite fighters meet, the fight often comes down to who can impose their style, who can adapt faster, and who can seize the key moments. By framing the fight this way, Algieri positions Canelo as more than just the underdog or the fading star. He is a legitimate threat with multiple paths to victory, making the fight a true toss-up in the eyes of those who study the sport closely.
Because I know better than to just trust that last thing I saw, because there's a lot of confounding factors.
The idea at play here is the classic calculus that separates a very good smaller man from a very good bigger man, and why that formula often tilts toward the athlete with more size when the skills are comparably elite. The argument leans toward Canelo because he represents the sturdier physical platform in a matchup with a master craftsman who is naturally smaller. This is not a knock on Terence Crawford's brilliance. It is an acknowledgement that when speed, timing, vision, and ring intelligence begin to approach parity, the man carrying the thicker frame, denser core, and heavier leverage tends to control how exchanges begin and how they end. In a fight that can swing on inches and moments, the sturdier foundation repeatedly wins the benefit of those inches and moments. The point is not that size alone wins. The point is that size attached to elite experience at higher weights multiplies the effect of every success. When Canelo places a glove on the body or the arms, when he crowds and leans, when he forces a clinch to reset, he is not only adding to the tally of blows and positions, he is quietly withdrawing from his opponent's energy account while protecting his own. Over time, the cost of doing business for the smaller man rises. This is why the framing compares a good big man and a good small man. The phrase is shorthand for an entire economy of exchange. Canelo carries force through compact mechanics that do not waste motion, and when those mechanics land on a smaller athlete, the shock can be felt not only in the head, but in the legs, the lungs, and the confidence. Crawford is a master at removing a bigger fighter's advantages through angles and rhythm, yet the case being made is that Canelo's craft plus his sturdier template make every successful moment compound at a higher rate. The more those moments add up, the more likely they are to tilt judges and erode the freedom a smaller artist needs. That is why the lean goes to Canelo. Not because the smaller man is lacking, but because skill meeting size at the elite level often produces a narrow edge that grows with time.
So you feel Canelo is going to win the fight?
I leaned Canelo, yeah.
Yeah.
I always have. It's the good big man versus the good small man.
The next point highlights that Canelo, while not a towering figure by traditional measures, has repeatedly crossed into territory occupied by much larger men and held his ground. The significance of that statement is not only physical, it speaks to comfort with mass and impact. When someone who is compact by nature spends years working against opponents with longer arms, thicker frames, and heavier shots, he learns how to keep a tight shape without being bullied. He learns how to roll with cutting shots rather than absorb them square. He learns which distances allow him to block and counter without giving the larger man the space to uncork the kind of straight blows that ruin nights.
Yes. Yeah. But Canelo's not slow. It's not like Canelo is actually a smaller man who's come up to fight a lot of bigger men.
That background matters when he faces a smaller elite who feasts on space and change. The athlete who has climbed into rooms filled with giants brings back lessons that are invaluable when the other man wins on finesse. Canelo's balance is built for that kind of negotiation. He carries his weight in a way that almost invites the first look, so he can take away the second. He is comfortable inching forward while presenting a high guard that can tilt and flex without crumbling. He is comfortable letting a flurry touch arms and shoulders because he knows what those touches feel like when they come from truly massive hands. In that environment, the smaller elite often discovers that darting in and out becomes a costlier project. Each entry risks being met by a short counter that is harder than expected. Each exit risks being tracked by feet that do not look fast, but arrive faster than the eye admits because the steps are short and purposeful. The crux of the point is that Canelo's experience with men much bigger than himself has taught him patience, economy, and resilience. Those qualities shrink a ring for anyone who prefers the clean air of space, and they make a skilled smaller man fight at a price he did not pay against peers of his own size. That is why the emphasis on Canelo's history against large opposition is more than resume talk. It is a map of habits that translate into control.
Because his hand speed, the guys can't deal with him. So his ability to cut off the ring, the fact that he imposes his.
Finally, we arrive at the tools that make the above calculations come alive. The focus here is on hand speed in tight quarters, the knack for cutting the ring, and the taste for mental pressure that does not let an opponent breathe. Canelo's hands are not only fast in a straight line, line. They are fast when space is cramped, when the guard is high, and when counters must be delivered from inside angles that require subtle shoulder turns. That kind of speed is devastating because it hides inside small motions that judges like and opponents hate. Add to that the skill of guiding an opponent into real estate where exits vanish. Canelo does this with steps that are half a beat ahead of the read. He will shade to the outside of the lead foot, show a level change, and then arrive on the angle where the ropes begin to act as a third glove. When that happens, the other man has to choose between standing his ground or trying to circle under duress. Both choices create openings for short counters to the body and the head. The mental component rides on top of all that. Canelo understands how to make a ring feel smaller than its dimensions. He jabs at arms and chest to mark territory. He watches reactions and files them for later. He talks with the eyes and the shoulders, telling the other man that the next minute will be harder than the last. This is pressure that does not require breathless aggression. It is pressure that accumulates while the clock quietly burns. Crawford is a master reader of patterns, but this approach denies him clear pictures. When he tries to reset, the ring is already narrower. When he tries to rest, a body shot steals the moment. When he tries to take a turn, a compact counter reminds him that every exchange has attacks. That is the argument for Canelo's speed and craft being the deciding elements. They are not just physical gifts. They are the delivery system for a plan that changes how the other man fights, thinks, and finally yields.
His will. He puts a lot of mental pressure on his opponents without even doing a whole lot. He doesn't throw a ton of punches. He throws less now than ever.
Taken together, these final points explain why the lean goes toward Canelo without dismissing the greatness across from him. The calculus of size meeting comparable skill creates a quiet advantage that grows with each minute. The comfort forged through years against larger frames makes tight spaces feel like home. The blend of quick hands, clever feet, and steady psychological weight turns a regulation ring into a funnel. None of this guarantees an easy night against a fighter as brilliant as Terence Crawford. It does, however, define a path where Canelo's profile fits the demands of the matchup. The smaller man who has lived among giants knows how to make another smaller master carry more than punches. If that happens, the speed that matters will be the speed of compact counters that judges cannot miss. And the pressure that matters will be the pressure that makes strategy bend. That is why many lean toward Canelo in a fight that will demand clarity of mind, patience of approach, and the ability to make every success echo.